So let's talk a little bit of national perception of the Jacksonville Jaguars going into the 2025 season, because I think possibly as a function of it being sort of a small market team that's going to go beneath the radar under normal circumstances anyways, I think there's this national perception that the Jaguars have no chance of competing in 2025. And I think when you look at 2024, and certainly when you look back at 2023, that perception probably isn't completely accurate. Now, 2024, there was a lot of hope going into last season. Now, of course, 2023 was the season the Jaguars started out like 8-3, collapsed down the stretch, and ended up missing the playoffs, finishing 9-8. Couldn't do anything right after that Cincinnati Bengals game when Christian Kirk went down. Trevor Lawrence suffered an injury that seemed to hamper him there. The Jaguars collapsed, no doubt about it, missed the playoffs by not winning their final game. And then going into 2024, the hope was with a healthy team again, the team would be able to pick up where they left off 2 seasons prior in that playoff run where they had the comeback victory against the Chargers in the playoffs. We all know the story. That didn't happen. 2024 was a brutal season for Jaguars fans. Just 4 wins on the season. Nothing seemed to go right in any of the close games. And it all sort of started week 1. Now, if you recall, and not to take Jaguars fans down memory lane of terrible memories, but the Dolphins game, the Jaguars were up, things were looking good. Travis Etienne is going into the end zone in the second half, and he fumbles the ball. The very next play, I believe it was Tyreek Hill, 80-yard touchdown, I think, if my memory serves me correctly. The Dolphins storm back, win the game, and that seemed to be the way the Jaguars' entire season went. But within the 2024 season, there's actually sort of a silver lining where you can point to and say, okay, the Jaguars were a bad team, but just like with a lot of things in the NFL, the margins were so slim that some minor improvements might lead to big results changes. Let's take a look at that a little bit. So the Jaguars carried throughout 2024 a 4-13 record, leaving them not even close to the playoffs. But buried in that, there were 10 games the Jaguars lost that were 1-possession games or fewer. So 7-point games or closer. There were 10 of those that the Jaguars lost in 2024. And there's a lot of factors that play into an NFL season, not the smallest of which is, of course, injuries. Now, the Jaguars were hampered on defense throughout the year. Tyson Campbell couldn't stay healthy throughout the entire season. The defense suffered, not only as a result of that, but the defense just was bad all year long. It was the second worst defense in the NFL. I think the only team that you can look at and say they had a worse defense than the Jaguars would have been the Carolina Panthers. The Jaguars' pass defense was absolutely abysmal throughout the entire season. On the other side of the ball, there were some injuries throughout, but the big one, of course, being that Trevor Lawrence missed a significant amount of time, partly probably because the team just wasn't on a track to be able to make the playoffs anyways. It was better to sort of shut Lawrence down and let him recoup and try to get him healthy for 2025. But the team had instability across the roster, and despite that, they were 4-13 with 10 losses of 1 possession or fewer points. And when you look at that, even if they had been able to pull out just half of those, 5, that boosts their record already up to 9 wins. So it's not that the Jaguars were equipped to win half of those 1-possession games. Obviously, they trailed in those games for a reason. But my point with saying all of that is there were injuries to consider. There was a league worst or close to league worst defense in play. The starting franchise quarterback was banged up all year long. And still, the Jaguars were not that far off of having a very competitive record in the NFL. And of course, with all things in a parity-driven league like the NFL, the margins are going to be close. Like, you're probably going to have a team occasionally that wins just a huge amount of their close games, and that's why they're in the playoffs. And we've seen that time and time again. And likewise, you're going to have teams that are in a lot of close games and lose most of those close games and end up out of the playoffs, just like the Jaguars in 2024. Obviously, they would have needed to be winning like 7 of those 1-possession games, and suddenly they're a playoff team. So the margins are closer than I think people realize with the Jaguars. And moving into the new season, season. What we're really hoping to see here is a better defense. If you can get your defense boosted up to like the 20th ranked defense, suddenly you're giving your offense a ton more support to work with. Or certainly if you could somehow get it up into the teens, like 15, 16, 17, a mid-tier defense, you're going to be giving your offense a lot more opportunity. If you can keep the franchise quarterback healthy, you're giving your offense a nice boost there. So even though the Jaguars looked like a really bad team in 2024, and certainly their record says they are, it's not all doom and gloom. And I think that's why you see a lot of the optimism from Jaguars fans going into this season. Like, there's not the mentality that the team hit the reset button and is completely starting over. Now, they are starting over in the sense that there's a new front office, there's a new coaching staff, but some of those core players are still around. And there's optimism in that if Liam Cohen can get the offense doing similar numbers to what they were doing last year and certainly the year before, except maybe cut down on turnovers, maybe boost the point output just a little bit. And if that defense can just become competent, then suddenly the Jaguars are already a fringe playoff team. And if there can be some sort of new contributors in there that we don't expect and players that sort of play maybe above what their expectation is, there's no reason the Jaguars shouldn't be a very competitive team, if not a playoff team, in the 2025 season, and then that could set them up fairly well moving forward for sustained success. Because keep in mind, the Jaguars have not put together sustained playoff runs, going to the playoffs 2 or more years in a row since the 1990s. I think there's still potential that this core group of players could set the Jaguars up for a pretty good level of success moving forward. And of course, all that will be borne out with time, and we have to wait for that. But the Jaguars are a better team, I think, than most give them credit. And the silver lining of finishing so poorly last year is it sets their schedule up in a way that's going to be beneficial this season. So they're going to have a better, more favorable schedule, a weaker schedule, because they finished where they did last season. Instead of like winning the division, they're not going up against all the other divisional first place teams. They are going up against the third place teams. So of course, sound off in the comments down below. We're less than a week as of recording until we actually see some preseason football in the form of the Hall of Fame game. So we've got some game content coming down the road very soon. I'm Shane, and I'll see you guys all in the very next video.